We just saw the new trailer for The Chosen Season 4, which was with the Christmas special, but now released on to the public. So let's dive into this and do our full breakdown of this trailer specifically. It's really, really interesting. A lot of great stuff. So let's dive in. Here we go. So first off, we'll talk about the dialogue a bit later. I'm going to kind of go through silently through this and walk you through what we're seeing so far. Some of these shots we've seen before, such as Jesus kind of contemplatively looking. Then we see Judas as they're kind of coming into this new house. I believe this whole section here is when Jesus and the apostles run away to Perea. This is the area across the other side of the Jordan on the far side of the Dead Sea that we know as Jordan and Palestinian-controlled areas today. But this is where Herod Antipas had Machaerus, where John the Baptist is killed, but also this is the land of Perea, where it says that Jesus and the apostles went to later on after the whole incident in John chapter 10, which we'll talk about as well. And we continue on. I think this is all in Perea. So they find some place to stay in Perea where they're running away after they've ran through the Jordan River. I think that's why they're wet. I think that's why they're in this location. Of course, we see more of the banquet. I think this is going to be a really interesting scene. I'm excited to see how this plays out, how the mood is, how the feel is. I believe this is going to be episode 1 because I think the whole episode 1 is going to be focused on John the Baptist. And this will be a huge, huge thing as well. Then, of course, we'll see Herod and Herodias as well in this banquet, which will be really interesting to see. There's Herodias right there, our first real good look at her, other than that scene that we saw previously a few months ago from Dallas, where he showed us a little bit of a scene with her and her daughter practicing this dance. We also see Herod Antipas here, which is a pretty big deal. Obviously, he's the ruler of this area, the tetrarch or the king or the ruler, whatever you want to call him there, put in power by Rome. Now, here we're seeing as everybody's relaxing and lounging, this, I believe, is in Lazarus's house. We've seen in the behind the scenes from The Chosen and all their YouTube videos that this is Lazarus's house. And so we see Jesus here. We see all the rest of the apostles. We also see Lazarus and his sisters as well, which is very cool to see. Then here we're seeing as they approach Caesarea Philippi. Now, I've done many videos about Caesarea Philippi on my main channel, The Snipe Life. We'll talk about it a lot more this season on The Chosen Sleuth to really dive in and talk about everything that's going on. But Caesarea Philippi is a really, really interesting place because there's so much pagan history there and really darkness that's there. Children's sacrifice, things like maybe even like animal sexual acts that are going on, different things like that during this time. And so the fact that Jesus would be here at all is like crazy, right? It's like a huge thing. And so seeing this upcoming is going to be massive. And of course, there's a gigantic scriptural portion here as well. Dallas says in the chat, hope you enjoyed it. Definitely did. I love this trailer. Looking forward to everything else that's coming out for sure. You guys killed it on this season, I think. And everything that I've heard so far, everything that I've seen so far in all of my research, it's been top notch. I think it's going to be an exciting season. So really, really looking forward to it for sure. As we continue, we actually see for our first time the full image of Caesarea Philippi. So if you don't know, Caesarea Philippi looks almost exactly like this. They did an amazing job of recreating this in The Chosen here. We see as there's 2 buildings there. Each of these are different like temples to different pagan things. And behind the one to the left, you'll see right here, is a gigantic hole in the wall in this cliff, okay? This is exactly how it looks in real life. These buildings are no longer here in real life, but this giant hole in the wall is at the back of this temple, and the back of this temple is actually open to that cave. And this is where they would do child sacrifices. They would throw children into the pool of water in this cave here, which is crazy. And this is the place that Jesus is going in order to talk about his kingdom and how he's going to overcome this darkness. Super, super cool. All this stuff here is CGI, by the way, on the top of these buildings. They made parts of these buildings, but then they have CGI that is covering the rest of them in order to make it look as real as possible and as big as it needs to be. Obviously, they couldn't build full buildings, but they did a really great job here. I think this is really, really, really close. And we'll see even some of the details that we see even closer as we look at this episode and as we look further into season 4. Some of the details that they did in Caesarea Philippi are actually really, really close to the original actual historical location. So really, really great job on this one for sure. Of course, we got Jesus back with his backpack here. Jesus waking up here. We also see this, which is going to be a big portion of season 4, which is the Great Sanhedrin. Of course, we've been theorizing. Hopefully, we'll be able to see Nicodemus again at some point. If not this season, then we should definitely see him in season 6 at the latest. But I'm hoping that we do see him in this season, that they're just hiding him from us because we haven't seen him in any of the behind the scenes quite yet. But he should be here soon. Maybe in season 5 to defend Jesus from the Sanhedrin. Maybe in season 6 when he helps to bury Jesus, if that happens in season 6. So, yeah, there's a couple different places where we should see him, but Nicodemus is a part of this group of 72 judges, the Great Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. And so that should be a big thing. Also, we're probably looking towards Yusuf maybe becoming a part of the Great Sanhedrin as well, because in Scripture, whenever Jesus is buried, Yusuf is kind of a part of that group as well. He's part of the judges. So, yeah, I don't know. Joseph of Arimathea is, I'm kind of translating. Yusuf, we know, is Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea is part of the Great Sanhedrin. So that's what I'm thinking. Anyway, so as we jump into that,
here
we see this.
That we now want the same thing as Pilate.
So now we're seeing as the Romans and the Jewish authority are kind of merging together in their ideals and what they want. They don't like this Jesus guy anymore. He's causing a lot of issues for Rome. He's causing a lot of issues for the Jewish people, and it's becoming a problem, right? So they're looking for solutions to this problem, which is obviously where we get into season 4 and 5 here.
Senior leaders in every district should question.
Here's our first real look at Caiaphas. Let's hear what he says here.
And expose Jesus.
So he's looking to expose Jesus. Of course, we see these two side characters, which is kind of another visual way of showing how the Jewish authority and the Roman authority are kind of coming together, and they want the same thing, right? We see, I always forget his name. Is it Lucius? Is this guy Lucius? And then we see Rabbi Akiva over here. And these two seem to be buddy-buddy right now, looking at what Jesus is saying. Obviously, these two are against Jesus, and they don't want him to prevail, right? Very different from Yusuf or Gaius, for example, which we'll see a lot more of this season as well, which I'm really excited about. Maybe not a lot more of Gaius, but definitely a large story point with Gaius for sure. Obviously, little James and Mary here in this image as well.
Can't stop seeing how he could be doing.
Then we see these guys over here. Of course, we saw this guy at the very end of season 3. Although we haven't seen much of him yet, I'm sure we'll see more and more. This, it looks to be at the temple as well. And look, they left the tracking markers here as well. In the last trailer, they left the little green tracking markers in the background. You can see them here as well on this little wall. This is the set in Utah. And so you can see those little tracking markers there. And this is actually a friend of mine who I was filming with during this time. That's so funny that he's right in the background there. Super, super good.
Doing things faster and more efficiently.
You deserve a...
And then here is a large part as well. We see Hadad making a return. Of course, we weren't expecting maybe to see Hadad again, maybe at some point, but we weren't sure. There's some really interesting things that I'm going to be talking about in the future of this channel about Hadad in particular, so keep an eye out for that. But Hadad obviously is a large portion of why Judas is doing what he's doing, right? As we've called him in the community for a while, Bob the businessman. Hadad is really the one that is challenging Judas to go into this dark place, right? To go into a place where it's like he's wanting to take money. He's wanting to kind of make sure that he himself is taken care of, right? Making sure that Judas is being paid for his time, right? As Hadad puts it here. Let's listen to what he says.
You deserve a stipend for your specialized work.
You deserve a stipend for your specialized work. And so that's how he's justifying taking money from the money bag, which we know that he does through scripture, right?
At least make sure that you have resources to keep the mission going.
Yep. And so he's justifying this. This is the small steps that we see. So Judas is such a massive part of season 4, 5, and 6 because, of course, he is the betrayer, right? And so having Judas take these small steps that lead to this massive betrayal is going to be so important for who he is as a character, and understanding what's going on there, right? Because a lot of people see Judas as this villain that's like twisting his mustache and he's like, oh, I'm this evil guy, right? But the truth is that he's a normal follower of Jesus, and that eventually he takes these small steps that lead to small steps that lead to small steps, and then he willingly betrays Jesus. Nobody tricks him into it, right? Hadad, even though in this version of Judas, right, Hadad is kind of like nudging him to take care of himself, Judas is still making these choices to do these things, right? And he's still walking down this path. And so there's a lot that's going to be really interesting to look at when we continue on here.
And at least make sure that you have resources to keep the mission going.
My ledgers are in the red.
So this is the scene that we saw previously with Quintus and Gaius that Dallas showed us. I believe you can still watch this full scene on the app or the website. If you go down to the Brazil live stream that was a few months ago, I believe that you can still watch this scene. Really interesting stuff here. Quintus, this is the first time that we're really seeing him completely out of control, it feels like. And I really wonder what's going to happen here, because there's some huge implications to what's going to happen to Quintus, what's going to happen to Gaius. Is there going to be demotions? Are there going to be movements around? What's exactly going to happen here? What are the punishments going to be for Quintus not having control of his city? There's a lot of different implications that could be happening here that I'm really excited to see for sure. And I love this scene. Brandon Potter does an amazing job, of course. Just awesome job. Really showing that anger and uncontrollability and starting to lose his composure a lot, for sure.
To make life difficult for the followers.
Now this as well is another scene that we saw previously. We've seen a portion of where looks like the apostles are getting in a fight with either the Sadducees or the Pharisees. You can't really tell from this. It's been kind of hard in The Chosen to differentiate between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but I'm sure we'll get some of that stuff here. It does look like this is in the Utah set, which is, has these large pillars there. So this is probably in Jerusalem, definitely because all these Pharisees or Sadducees are here, but also because, we see the set here and we've seen plenty of different scenes in this location. So I do wonder exactly what's taking place here. Looks like we see little James, we see Simon the Zealot, and we also see Simon, or now as we know him as Peter, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But not exactly sure who else is in here. It looks like just those three are right here, but not sure.
Jesus.
So here is a little bit of a closer look to Caesarea Philippi, the same place that we saw before. Again, remember, a lot of this stuff up here is actually CGI, so they did an amazing job with all the finishing of the building and everything. Yeah, they did really well. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. You'll see this guy in the corner, which is something that I love to point out right here. This is someone who is a worshiper of Pan. Okay, this is Pan's court. Pan is a god in the Roman pantheon. Okay, in the Greek pantheon. And he is like a goat man, like a faun, right? From, if you've seen Narnia, right? The faun from Narnia, really similar, where he's like a humanoid creature with horns and furry legs and goat legs, right? These people are obviously worshiping Pan because some of them have horns on their heads and they have fur over their bodies in different areas. I think this guy might have horns on his head as well. I can't quite tell from over here, but this is obviously someone who is worshiping Pan. And this is Pan's grotto, which is in between these two buildings. And this is where they would do different sacrifices. And there would be a lot of, I don't know any better way to say this, but a lot of phallic symbols in this area, which I'm sure will be PG-ified for The Chosen. I'm sure there will not be as many sexual themes in this area as there were in real life for some of this stuff. So, but this is a really interesting place for Jesus to be. I think in real life, Jesus probably wouldn't be here in the midst of all of this, but he would be nearby talking about it. I don't think he would be right in the midst of it, but this is a great visual representation of how Jesus is taking over dark spaces. So I think that's really, really good. But let's continue on. Let's hear what he says here.
It is on this rock that I will build my church.
So this is immediately after Jesus renames Simon to Peter. And we can look at that if we jump into some Bible scripture here. Let's see. Ooh, I always miss these. There we go. Matthew 16, here we go. And I tell you, you are Peter, and then immediately the line that we're hearing here, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. But what Jesus is talking about here is not like the gates of hell itself, right? What he's talking about here is that big hole that we talked about previously in the back of the temple, okay? The back of that temple over there, that big hole in the wall where they're actually sacrificing children, that is called the gates of hell. In colloquially in the culture, that's what it was called, because they truly believed that it was a portal from our plane of existence into hell, which is why he's saying that. But what Jesus means by this is that his church will overcome the darkness, and it will prevail against the darkness, be able to defend against it, and be able to overcome it offensively. Really, really interesting stuff there.
And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it.
And I'll go back there just a second.
And the gates of hell.
So this right here, the Chosen team did an amazing job on these little outlets here. You can see that in each of these little coves, there are heads of gods or goddesses from the Roman and Greek pantheon. And so we see here in the center that this is a shrine to Pan. You see the different sacrifices are taking place. There's like an altar with skulls on it and different things. And you can see as there's all these different things in Pan's grotto where people would go and they would celebrate him and they would do that. This is almost like inch for inch exactly how it appears in real life. There's a large grotto here, and then there's 3 other ones that line up just like this. Amazing attention to detail, especially with a historical location. I love seeing the Chosen be as accurate as possible. Now, not everything in the Chosen is like perfectly accurate, right? But I love when there's these little touches where it's like, oh, okay, they really did look into that. They really did do their research, and it really pays off here. We'll do a lot of talking about this when this episode comes out for sure, which I think will be episode 2 or 3. From what Dallas has said, talking about the other episodes, telling us that this is episode 3, this is episode 4. We've seen them talk about Peter, be Peter, at least in episode 4, I think. So we know that his name change is probably coming in episode 2 or 3, because episode 1 is primarily going to focus on, I think, John the Baptist. So anyway, let's continue on.
Hell shall not prevail against it.
Now we see this moment here as well. We see a bunch of people with palm fronds. So this is definitely hinting towards the triumphal entry, right? It's got to be. But there's a bunch of other people that are running around, walking around. We see these large horses here as well. And then we see another new character that we haven't really met, but we do know who it is.
This infernal chaos. Why can no one control it?
So that right there is with Joanna, right? This is her husband, Chusa, I believe. We see him again in a previous section where he is sitting with her at the banquet. So this is Chusa, who is Joanna's husband, who we know from the previous season is actually unfaithful to Joanna and is with other women and doing different things as well. So I think we're gonna play into that as well a little bit in this season. But we see as Chusa actually is in what looks like to be Jerusalem with Joanna, and this is most likely near the end of the season, I think, because it looks like they're getting palm fronds ready. And of course, we know we're going into Holy Week. The first thing in Holy Week is what? The triumphal entry. So, like, it should be near the end of the season would be my guess, but not 100% sure.
Control these people.
Now, here is Jesus, and it looks like Mother Mary looking out into the wilderness. I'm not 100% sure where this is either, or what's kind of going on here, but interesting shot. Then this is the thumbnail of the trailer that we saw. Of course, this is a major part of what Jesus was talking about during the Sermon on the Mount, right? He's teaching all these things about how do you love your enemies? How do you make sure that you're doing the right things? How do you make sure that you're following God correctly, right? One of the things that he says is in Matthew 5, and he says this. He says, we'll start a little bit earlier. He says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. And if anyone would sue you, take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well." Verse 41. "If anyone forces you to go 1 mile with him, go 2 miles. Go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." So this verse 41 is the one that's really, really important because it leans us into culture and understanding what's actually going on. Here's another version of Matthew chapter 5 that says this: "If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for 1 mile, carry it 2 miles." This is in the NLT. It gives us a little bit clearer picture of what's going on if we read both of those, the ESV and the NLT. And so we see that this is talking about soldiers that are asking you to carry their gear. And this was a law during the time of Jesus, that if the Roman soldier asked you to carry his gear outside of the city, you needed to carry it 1 mile to give them a rest and allow them to not have to carry their heavy gear the whole entire way. But what Jesus is saying is, don't just take it 1 mile, take it 2 miles. Show them extra love, show them extra compassion, show them extra grace, even though they don't deserve it, right? Again, this is what it's like to be a Christian, right? If the Roman authority who's controlling you and basically enslaving you asks you to do something, do it to the best of your ability so that you can glorify God through it no matter what. That's exactly what's happening here. And this is such a striking visual, having all of the apostles wearing Roman helmets and gear. I'm really interested to see what Jesus is carrying and what he's wearing, because that could be a huge visual here for sure. But we're seeing Roman soldiers without their helmets here as their packs are being carried by all the apostles. And I'm interested to see how Matthew reacts to this as well. I feel like that's going to be really, really funny. But we'll kind of see here. Real quick, I'll just say during the live stream, hey, if you're not subscribed to this channel, this is the main place that you're going to get breakdowns for The Chosen, the main place that you're going to get insights into behind the scenes and upcoming things for season 4, and then of course season 5 whenever they start shooting for that. So make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. We're going to have a ton of content talking about Christian media, talking about The Chosen specifically. It's going to be amazing. So let's dive into it. Make sure you're subscribed and leave a like on this video if you can. Let's continue on. Now we see this, remember what I was talking about before, as they're crossing the Jordan River. This is obviously some sort of Jordan River. This would be the only body of water that looks like this in Israel. And so obviously they're crossing the Jordan River here. There's a passage of scripture that tells us, I'll actually go to it so that we can see it here. John chapter 10. John chapter 10, we see at the very bottom, what does it say here? Yep. Once again, they tried to arrest him, but he got away and left them. He went beyond the Jordan River near the place where John was first baptizing and stayed for a while. So this, I think, is what's happening here, is where Jesus is running past the Jordan River with everybody. And Jesus is right here. Big James is right here in the middle, and he is actually injured, which we see a couple of different times in this section here. But there's a couple other things that happen in John chapter 10. I would really encourage you to read John chapter 10, because there's a lot of really interesting things that from the behind the scenes, we've seen a ton of this stuff happening in season 4. It's going to be really, really, really awesome. So it's going to be really cool. Definitely check out John chapter 10 if you want to know more kind of going into season 4 for sure. Now there's Big James again. Like I said, he's injured there. How could he get injured? Read John chapter 10. And we see here for sure he's injured and being bandaged up. We also see him later on as he's bandaged for the majority of the episodes, kind of leading into Lazarus' resurrection and things like that.
Just happened to all of you.
So here's Zebedee talking to John and Big James. Look again, Big James is injured again here. This is before he's bandaged up.
About to get worse.
Now here we see everybody talking and walking. There's a lot of scenes of traveling this season, which we're going to see a lot of for sure. Of course, obviously we see Reza Diaco as well, which I'm really excited to see him as Philip this season. Going to be really awesome.
Now that I'm here.
And again, we've seen this scene before with Jesus, Thaddeus, and little James. We've seen this, I think it was part of the Brazil stream as well. So I think you can go actually see this one online. This was a really good episode, just kind of reminiscing as how they started their journey together, because in The Chosen, not in scripture, but in The Chosen, they started the journey with Thaddeus, little James, and Jesus, and then they gathered everybody else. We didn't really see that on screen, but that was kind of what was hinted towards. In scripture, it's a bit different, obviously, but in The Chosen, that's how it started here. Matthew here writing again. This is the healing of the blind man born blind from birth, and we see Jesus mixing together the spit and mud and putting it on the guy's eyes in order to heal him. This is where Matthew's writing that down.
Physical death does not.
Now here, obviously, we see some Shiva garb. I don't know if they actually wore funeral garments back then, or if they just ripped their clothes and did like ashes and stuff. But here is a couple of different interesting things kind of happening here. One, this is obviously later in the season because we see everybody's new clothing, okay? That's a big thing. Mary is in her new clothing. Little James is in his new clothing. Thomas. Of course, we got Simon over here, the dark version of Peter. He's got darker clothing over here, right? Now, Jesus is staying the same because he doesn't need to change clothes because clothes is an indication of character development, right? And so Jesus doesn't need to develop. He is already perfect, right? How he is. We see the two girls, the sisters of Lazarus, in their Shiva garb, in their funeral garb. And then also, if you peek behind here, you can also see little James, or Big James, sorry, has that head wrap still on in this section here as well. Looks like they're approaching what looks to be Lazarus's tomb. And then we see more of that. As all the guys, including Zebedee, is here. Looks like, I think that's Zebedee. Looks like Zebedee is here as well, as he is pushing this stone away. I wonder why Zebedee is in Bethany, other than maybe he heard about Lazarus' death. I'm not 100% sure why he would be there, although we did see him earlier on when Big James was injured as well. So I do wonder why he's either traveling with them or is where they are. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. We see Andrew, we see Simon the Zealot, and then we see Peter as they're moving this stone away 3 days after Lazarus' death, of course. And we see as Jesus raises his hands, we see the sisters again, Mary and Martha.
Lazarus, come out!
And of course, we see a little bit of Lazarus' face right here, if you didn't catch that. We see Lazarus' face just in the corner as he begins to walk out. Maybe that's his arm. I think it's his face, though. Yeah, so we see just a little bit of that in the corner there. Right there. And then we see as the guys are coming into the house, this looks like the place where they're celebrating Hanukkah, because look at over here on the side. We see all these candles are lit, which is really, really cool. And I'm not sure what 100% is going on here.
Remember you wishing there could be another.
And let's see, back up a little bit. Of course, this scene is amazing. We'll talk about this in just a second. Let's see, Mary blowing out a candle here. Not sure there's a huge significance to that. Looks like this might be Lazarus's house. I can't tell on this one.
Remember you wishing there could be another.
And then this is a massive scene. Okay, so what can we pick out of this? Obviously, there's a ton of palm branches. So we know that this is like something to do with the triumphal entry, maybe. But also, who is this character in the middle, right? This doesn't look like Jesus, obviously. Like, Jesus isn't wearing armor and riding a horse, it looks like. So we don't really know what's going on there. Although there is a lion on the back of the shield. And if we know anything in The Chosen, we've seen a lot in the behind the scenes, like a lot in the behind the scenes of King David, where there's figures of lions everywhere. And so that may be King David here, and maybe a flashback to another time, which this is one of the things I'm most excited about season 4 is all the stuff we're going to get about David, because there's a ton of stuff coming, that we've seen the behind the scenes of them filming and stuff that looks so good. Including, what is her name? Is it Mariah Smallbone? Coming back as, Bathsheba. Yeah, really interesting stuff. I think it's going to be awesome. There's some really, really cool stuff coming. So I'm really, really excited for that. We got all these people down here with palm fronds, all these people up here. Yeah, very, very cool.
Other way.
Jesus here walking through. I'm not sure where this is. Everybody's kind of walking in the direction. I'm not sure. We've seen a lot of images of them sitting at this table, so I'm thinking that this is during their time in Perea, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Just my guess. And then here, I really don't know what's going on. We saw this in the previous trailer as well, and I really don't know 100% what's going on with Big James or who he's attacking. I assume that it's a Roman, because I don't think he would physically attack a Pharisee unless they attacked him. I would assume it has to do something with the Roman people, maybe Quintus, but probably Lucius or, one of those two. Maybe Atticus. I doubt it, though. But John is obviously trying to stop him here, but Big James with a dagger is slightly scary, for sure. We see John's
Still
feet
don't
here.
know why I thought
John the Baptist, of course, being led into execution.
it used to be this way. The bitter, often
That's so crazy. And then we see here as well, Jesus walking up the stairs, looks like in Jerusalem. We see the posse behind him, of course, all the apostles.
mingled with the sweet.
And then another running scene. This is really interesting as well. Mary, this is a scriptural moment as well, where Mary actually goes and she runs to Jesus outside of Bethany, and she tells him that Lazarus has died, and that this is it's a horrible thing, basically. And then here is where we see one of the most famous scriptures of all time, the shortest scripture in the Bible.
You told us it would be like that. Was how you lived.
So Jesus wept right here.
The man of sorrows.
So this is such a culmination. I love the trailer, how it does this here, because this is such a culmination of what Jesus is doing all throughout this season, right? We saw in that previous news scene that Dallas just showed us a few days ago, that Jesus is tired. Jesus is exhausted in this season. And so the culmination of him being exhausted and being irritated with his followers not being able to understand him is that he breaks down and he cries at the death of Lazarus, because everything is just falling for him, right? Everything is like, I'm trying to explain to you, but you don't get it. And then finally he gets to this point where he just falls and he's exhausted and his friend is dead. And it's like this horrible moment. And everybody's looking at him to see what he's going to say. Like, is he going to be angry? Is he going to say something profound? Is he going to be upset? And then he just breaks down and he cries. That's going to be, it's going to be, it's going to be so crazy. So good. Mother Mary,
Acquainted
of course.
with grief.
And that's it. So excited. Of course, like I said, make sure to follow along, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to follow us through January, because we'll be at the premiere. It's going to be amazing. I'll try to give you as much behind the scenes access as I can for that. Talk to as many people and see what's kind of going on during that event. It's going to be awesome. And then of course, February is when everything comes out. It's going to be amazing, and it's a huge testament to who The Chosen is, to see what they're going to do, right? To see how things are going to work out in the theaters with a whole season of a show being shown, which is like so crazy to have that. So it's going to be awesome. Definitely let me know what your thoughts are for season 4 down in the comments below.